Hi, doctor. My name is WULEI. My topic is the research of the impact of the consumer price index and the final consumption expenditure on the GDP growth rate. This is my individual project. There are five main parts. First, introduction. Look at the background as a key indicator to measure the overall economic situation of a region. The growth rate of gross domestic product has always attracted the attention of policymakers and scholars. This indicator not only reflects the total economic value, but also is one of the evaluation bases for the speed and the trade of economic development. And there are many factors that affect the GDP growth rate, among which the consumer price index and the final consumption expenditure are two important factors. The CPI growth rate represents the change in prices and is directly related to our living costs. The FCE growth rate reflects the total expenditure of the government and the individuals on service and goods consumption, reflecting market demand. This research uses quantitative methods to study the impact of the growth rates of those two factors on the GDP growth rate. And the existing research studied in this area firstly develop a long-term relationship between some government expenditure and the GDP through research on the U.S. medical system. And new actually point out in their study of the Chinese stock market that CPI directly reflects the price changes faced by consumers, and this indicator has a more direct impact on the overall economic situation. However, few studies have simultaneously analyzed how the growth rates of CPI and the FCE affect the GDP growth at the same time. In addition, existing studies are mostly focused on signal economy and lack cross-national comprehensive analysis, which limits the universality and the scope of application of the conclusions. In order to fill the research gap, this paper studies the impact of CPI and FCE growth rates on GDP growth rate through panel data from the World Bank database. The study involves the 15 economics with the largest economic output in the world. So the results can partially reflect the current state of the global economy. This can not only help expand the theoretical achievements in this field, but also provide more basis for policymakers. And then is about the literature review. Firstly, the impact of the inflation rate on economic growth. On the one hand, some studies have shown that the moderate inflation can stimulate investment and consumption, thereby promoting economic growth. On the other hand, excessive inflation may inhibit economic growth. And next is about the impact of the FCE on economic growth. Regarding the role of the FCE on economic growth, the positive effect is a common view we saw. Customer demand is one of the important driving forces for economic growth. Increasingly, purchases of goods and services will increase total demand, which will directly promote GDP growth. Then is about the method and date. Existing studies have mainly focused on a single economy. And scholars study Bagras real economic growth rates through the ARDL model. The focus is on the long-term relationship between independent variables in the model, such as total consumption and the GDP growth rate. One points out that the positive correlation between economic growth and the CPI in his study of China through the FMOLS model. Another study based on time series data used the OLS model. The results show that the government cannot rely on inflation to stimulate the economy in the long run. So there are some research gaps. Relatively few studies have considered both factors on the GDP growth rate. Scholars mention in their article that in addition to financial policy, price stability and consumer demand are also key factors affecting economic development. Existing studies have mainly focused on a single economic and local heterogeneity analysis for cross-national comparisons. This study attempts to fill the gap in related research based on pilot data. This study explores the impact of the CPI and FCE growth rates on GDP growth through a fixed effect model. It is expected to provide a more comprehensive reference for policies. Next is about the methodology. First, I want to introduce the econometric framework. The first step is the statistical description. Next, we do the unit root test to test the stability of our data. Then the co-integration test are used if there is a unit root. Then next is the model establishment. There are three models we will establish. Next is the F-test and the Holman test. These two tests are used to choose the good model. After that, regression results can cancelled from the selected model. And after then, we need to do the diagnostic test to check for the violations of the model. And finally, we need to modify the model and re-establish the regression to get new results. Next is about the model design. There are three models we will introduce here. First is the pod OLS. This model does not take into account the heterogeneity between different individuals and factors that change over time, ignoring individual differences and the time effects. The model is here. And then is the fixed effect model. And the fixed effect model is a panel data analysis method that can fix time effects or individual effects. And this model can establish eliminate the impact of those unobserved heterogeneity on the established estimation results, thereby providing more correct parameter estimates. You can see here, beta 1 and beta 2 are the coefficients, and GDP is the dependent variables. CPI growth rate, FCE growth rate are the independent variables, and these two are related to the time effects and the individual effects. Next is the random effects model. The model also takes unobserved heterogeneity into account. Compared with factor effect model, this model assumes the existence of random variables that are independent of the explanted variables. The next part is the date source and variables. First, about the date. The data in this research comes from the World Bank database. And the study selected the top 15 countries in terms of the total GDP in 2023 as representatives. Based on the annual data of these countries in the past 10 years, the latest situation of the research problem can be reflected. The panel data is balanced. Then there are three main variables in this research. First, the GDP growth rate. This is annual percentage growth rate of GDP at market prices based on the constant local currency. And next is CPI growth rate. This is calculated using consumer price index data from 2013 to 2023. And the third is FCE growth rate, which is based on the constant local currency. FCE is the sum of final consumption expenditures of household general government. There are two hypotheses. The first one is the CPI growth rate has a positive impact on the GDP growth rate, which effect is heterogeneous. The second is the FCE growth rate has a positive impact on the GDP growth rate, which effect is heterogeneous. And next, we will go to the empirical analysis. And the first is about the descriptive analysis. The table one shows the described statistics, and it shows that values of scaners and the three variables are different. These values of GDP and FCE are elective, which means that the data distribution of these two variables is left scaled. The left scaled GDP distribution means that there were extreme values on the left side of the variable. This is consistent with the minimal GDP value. And there are also extreme values on the left side of FCE, indicating that FCE has declined significantly in some years. The distribution of CPI is right-scaled, and so there are extreme values on the right side. The highest CPI growth rate reaches 15.53%, indicating that there is high inflation in some years. And next is the results of pilot unit road test. And it can be seen that the unit road tests are shown here. The p-values are also very small. Most of them are smaller than 0.01. Overall, data of all variables appears to be stationary. Next is the model comparison. We use these two tests to choose the best or the appropriate model for this research. And in this research, the F-test, Hermes test, the results are shown in this table 3. Comparing the results of the redundant fixed effect test, it can be seen that the fixed effect model is suitable for the data selected in this research. The p-values related to the period F statistic and the cross-section period F statistic are smaller than 0.05, which means the fixed effect model is significant. Comparing the results of Hausman test, the p-value related to the period random and chi-square statistic is 0. The p-value of that of cross-section random and period is also 0. This means that the null hypothesis can be rejected. The random effect model is not appropriate. And then is the diagnostic test. After get the results of the regression, we need to do this to check the correct of the model. Firstly, the residual cross-section dependence test result is in table 05. The p-values of all statistics are less than 0.05, indicating that the null hypothesis cannot be rejected at the significant level of 0.05. There is cross-sectional dependence. And then according to table 6, the p-values are less than 0.05, indicating that the null hypothesis cannot be rejected at the significance level of 0.01. And heteroscedasticity exists in both cross-section and temporal dimensions. And so we need to modify the model and re-estimate the results. It's shown that CPI and FCE growth rates have the same positive impact on the GDP growth rate, and their impacts are significant in the 0.05 significant level. And you can see the coefficients are 0.157 and 0.791, same with the model before modifying. According to the effective model, the relationships varies from time and regions. R squares and the adjusted R squares are also same like before, and they are high in 0.92 and 0.9, indicating that the model have a good fit. The F statistic is high and the probe is 0, which means that the model is significant. The finally part is um, discussion and conclusion. First, the discussion. The results of two-way regression shows that both CPI and the FCE have significant positive effects on GDP. The coefficient of CPI is 0.157 and the p-value is 0.039, indicating that for every 1 unit increase in the CPI increase rate, the GDP growth rate is expected to increase by 0.157 units. The coefficient of FCG is 0.791 and the p-value is zero, indicating that for every 1 unit increase in the FCE growth rate, the GDP growth rate is expected to increase by 0.791 unit. In addition, the model results also confirm the different countries have different fixed effects. For example, China's fixed effect is 0.748, indicating that China's GDP growth rate is 0.783 units higher than the benchmark country when other variables are controlled. And the impact of CPI and FCE on GDP also have a time fixed effect. And the R square of the model is 0.9227, like I said before, indicating that the model can explain 92.925% of the variance in the independent variable and has a good degree of fit. The policy implications, first of all, promoting consumption is one of the effective way to promote economic growth. The economic government should take measures to stimulate consumer demand. And next, although inflation has a certain impact on the economy, its direct role in promoting GDP growth rate in the short term is not as adverse as consumption. Therefore, then formulating policies, more attention should be paid to healthy development of the consumption sector. In addition, policymakers should consider the specific circumstances of the country and formulate different economic policies. And because the relation between variables has a time fixed effect, so the policies also need to establish the policies according to different situations. Okay, next, limitation and the feature indications. Firstly, the date only covers 15 major economics from the 10 years period, which may not fully represent the global situation. Secondly, due to the date limitation, some country variables were not included. In addition, the models assume that individual effects are unrelated with the explanatory variables, but the assumption needs further verification. So for the further study, firstly, we need to improve the date. The country numbers should be bigger and the time period should be longer. And then more times more complex models can be used, such as the dynamic panel date models, to deal with the potential endogeneity and spatial dependent problems. That's all my presentation. Thanks.